Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
Had a little almost hiccup there. It was
A little
odd.
hiccup. No
Yeah,
worries.
it's fine. It's the new year. It's our
Mhm.
first non-joint list since the end of the summer in August when we did our top 5 movies of the first half of 2022. And
not hard to believe.
yeah, it's been a really long time. We've been doing a few joint lists recently, but we are back with just a top 5 list where we each have our own top 5 sequels of the 21st century, because we've got a lot of good sequels this year. We got Top Gun Maverick and Glass Onion, a Knives Out story, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Avatar came back with The Way of Water. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish is a surprise success.
Yep.
We'll see if any of those made any of our lists, but one small caveat is we are not including any of the Lord of the Rings sequels for 2 reasons, really. One, they would be all of our top choice, I would assume, and 2, they were all filmed at the same time as basically one really long movie that just needed to get split into 3 parts so people could actually see it in a theater.
Yeah.
So to make it a little more fun, we're just going to separate and take out The Lord of the Rings. Just know that all of us would have either Two Towers or Return of the King as our number 1 sequel of the year, or just kind of both of them as sort of one thing. Yes, not of the year, of the century.
Yeah.
So anything you guys want to share before we kick this off?
I guess I realized when I was watching movies for this list that I could definitely, we could have done like a top 10, that'd be a really long episode, so we won't. But I think there's like 10 to 15 like really solid, good sequels that like had a lot going for them. And I guess there was a lot more to choose from than I thought, even excluding Lord of the Rings.
Agreed.
If we would have included Lord of the Rings, we basically would have had to do a top 10, I feel like, because our top 5s would have been a lot of the same stuff.
Agreed.
And there's so many different kinds to talk about, but it is interesting because certain genres of movies are definitely more represented in the sequel group.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, generally you're going to expect lots of sort of science fiction, fantasy, or like thrillers, superhero movies, action franchises, like, fast movies like John Wick. Saw, there's like 10 of those now.
Yeah, horror franchises for sure.
Horror franchises as well. Yep.
And then you've got kids movies as well.
Yeah, basically. It's an interesting mix and kind of unbalanced to
interesting group for sure. All right, well, yeah, I'm ready to start if you guys are.
Yeah,
I am. And Adam, you're at the top of the list here, so I think we're just going to kick it to you.
Yeah, I figured might as well go first. My first one, and I'll do the.
I got this whole thing, so you
got it. All right.
Yeah.
My first one is Dr. Sleep from 2019. Nice. I know we've talked about this a bunch, but I actually just talked to a friend this weekend about this movie because he's like, I didn't really like The Shining, and it just didn't really pull me in. I don't really I understand why it's like people consider it good, but I didn't like it. And I told him about Dr. Sleep, and he hadn't heard of it, and I said the sequel was written in like 2015, and then they made it in 2019. And it just adds more like description. It adds more like mythos to the magic that exists in the world and gives you reason to care about it more. And it just explains what's happening a little bit better. And I love the villains in it, the whole group of people. There's a lot going on that references the first one without really stepping on its toes or stepping on what it did that made it good. It just builds on all of that. And I think that's the most important part of a sequel is you can't rewrite what happened in the first one or just like change a couple things to make it fit better. It is what it is. That's what made it good. This builds upon that and expands in such a way that the universe of The Shining gets a little bit bigger without doing any real damage to it. And I obviously really love the movie because we talked about it a bunch. So
I like this pick. I think we all like this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think Flanagan did a good job of, like you said, kind of showing us, keeping us in that world, but still outside of the Overlook Hotel itself. Like we we were just in like suburbia and middle class neighborhoods and kind of normal America, but it still felt like it was the Shining
Yeah.
realm, and that's hard to pull off. And Mike Flanagan did a good job.
Honestly, I think one of the more difficult sequels that we're going to be talking about today, just because it is adapting another book,
Mhm.
and then it also needs to continue the legacy of a highly acclaimed movie that the author, like Stephen King, hated Kubrick's adaptation.
Yeah.
And they're both huge in their own way. So he had to
Mhm.
balance all of those things. And I think it's really impressive that he was able to pull it off.
Yeah, the stakes were high. All right.
So speaking of the stakes being high,
Mhm.
my number 5 is Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
This was, I mean, the first one was huge in 95. They came out with Toy Story 2, which just sort of like was almost great on accident in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a decade that passes. Everybody's done with Toy Story. And then we hear Toy Story 3 is coming out. And it just feels like the biggest cash grab in the world.
Yep.
But they come back and they made Toy Story 4 eventually, which I think is really good and serves as a pretty good epilogue to this. But the first 3 Toy Story movies, like basically the Woody and Andy story, and wrapping that up, I mean, it gives one of the most like touching and heartfelt and borderline like perfect endings to a trilogy you can possibly have.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
sure.
Everybody likes the end of this movie. Like 60-year-old men were weeping.
I was weeping when I rewatched it 2 nights ago. That's for sure.
You can't not. It's impossible to not at least get teary-eyed, even if it's your like 40th watch of Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
This is true.
And that's so Toy Story 3 was also going to be my number 5, but I made a little switch at the last second to get another movie in. But yes, I rewatched it. I loved it, and I forgot how good it was. I forgot like how they do a really good job of keeping the main core characters as like the driving force behind the plot, and it just feels way more like you said. Number 4 is like a good epilogue, but Toy Story 3 is like the actual like ending to like the saga. And I don't think that you could have come up with a better ending, especially because just the original concept in 95, like a kid's toys come alive, like, well, eventually the kid is going to grow up and stop playing with them. That's that's the natural, like, well, what are we going to do about that? And they just nailed it. So yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, the writing's fantastic here. And I mean, like you just touched on, like the premise is already good. It's knowing the next chapter and that you're going to be in good hands. And like, that's the magic here, is like knowing that it's going to be okay. And I mean, obviously Toy Story 1 came out when we were all very young. And this kind of feels like this came out roughly when we were, when did Toy Story 3 come out?
It came out our freshman year of college.
Yeah. So like exactly the time that our generation was going on and really truly moving away from home for the first time. And it perfectly felt great. So
definitely. Also, I always kind of forget about how it's basically like parodying and honoring like The Great Escape toward the end of the movie. Like they just do a great job with that stuff too. It's just movie's a blast and hits the heartfelt moments as well. So that's my number 5. And Dylan, you another one with high expectations.
Yes, even higher expectations for my number 5, and that is Star Wars 3: Revenge of the Sith from 2005. And massive expectations, and the shadow of the originals to live up to when George Lucas started doing the prequels. And in my opinion, the first 2 are bad. The first one I really don't like. The second one I think is pretty bad. And for like the first 45 minutes of this one, I don't really like it. But then about halfway through, it starts to figure itself out. And then the last hour is just banging, in my opinion. It's just literally, it lives up to all of the hype, everything. It makes up for the earlier 2 movies. Like, I just think, and it ties in, it just ties in the whole world, the whole Star Wars branching universe into this just like one defining pinnacle moment.
Yeah.
And it pulls it off, which is so hard to do, because that's like everyone is thinking from the very beginning, like, what's it going to look like when like he finally turns into Vader? And to actually like pull that off in such a great way where it's just rewatchable. I still have a great time. I get caught up in it, and like even like the simple kind of dialogue and kind of some of the cheesiness of it, I feel like almost works like in the last hour because it all feels very like an opera
Yeah,
almost.
for sure.
Like a just very overly dramatic like theater production. Like it's just so like how can you not get caught up in the emotions? And yeah, so I'm a sucker for it. But so that's gonna be episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I did have Toy Story 5 or Toy Story 3. They were battling it out for the 5 position, but since you had Toy Story, I'm like, well, I want to at least give a little shout out to episode 3.
Yeah. I'd agree. I don't think the first like the prequel trilogy is very good, but I think this one has one of the best fight scenes in movie history. Like the Anakin Obi-Wan fight at the end on I forget the name of the planet, but the volcano planet is absolutely top tier. Like that is one of the coolest choreographies of a sword fight you can possibly get. And then you add the emotion, like you were my brother, Anakin, like all of that, like finally coming to a head, and that's the moment that branches the rest of the series as you touched on, and everything else is it centers around this moment and Vader being born. Essentially, they absolutely crush that, and that fight scene is just
juxtaposing that with the Yoda Palpatine fight, which is also like legendary, which you've been waiting to see Yoda. And it's like, how did Yoda not kill Palpatine? Yoda's like the man. He's like, like he can do anything. And then just like mostly just the part where we see the other Jedi get, betrayed and killed in Order 66. It's just this overarching like despair and gloom that just kind of like makes it all feel like suddenly not cheesy and corny, but actually like deadly, like heavy, and like, God, the universe didn't have to be this way.
It just falls into chaos because of the plans of a few. Yeah.
Well, it also, and this is the one thing that I actually will give the prequel trilogy over the original, is they've actually established that there are like people that live on these planets and there are stakes and the decisions or the way these battles go or like the political decisions like impact people's lives.
Yeah.
And the original trilogy doesn't really have a lot of interest in that. It's not what it's going for, but that's why this moment I think works so well, is because they do actually establish this world. And then in turn, it almost makes the original trilogy, it adds some weight to that because you've established that base.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of like, oh yeah, everything's in disarray now. We don't even need to, it's just all bad.
Yeah.
And we at least kind of understand why it is.
They're hiding out. The rebels are hiding out on all these weird planets that we just seem to hop to. And it's like, you understand why that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Fantastic. So
great choice for number 5.
Yeah. All right. So, back to you, Adam.
Yeah. So my number 4, I actually went with something from this year or this last year. It's 2023 now. So 2022, Top Gun Maverick. We did an episode on Top Gun. We did an episode on Top Gun Maverick, and we talked about how much better of a movie this is than Top Gun. Top Gun's interesting and it's fun to look at, but it has nothing very good for story. It's like he doesn't win, like he doesn't get top of his class. He gets the girl, but congratulations, like woo, that was going to happen regardless. Like there's a lot of things that go wrong or just aren't very good in Top Gun, and this one actually has a solid through line. The action's incredible. The shooting of the cockpit cam and actual like the dog fighting that happens in the flights of the planes is bananas and fantastic, and Tom Cruise cranks it up yet again. Every movie he seems to top himself. We don't know how he does it, but it's just Tom Cruise being insane. This movie also like made like $1.5 billion. Like this was one of the biggest movies of all time. It's hard not to say like this movie might still be in theaters. Like this came out in July.
Places. Yeah.
Like it came out Memorial Day weekend, so end of May.
Like you can't tell me that a movie that has this much box office success is not a good sequel or not better than its original. I mean, you can talk about if box office numbers matter when you put up like Avatar or something, but that's just because people are going to go see it 18 times. This one just had so much else going for it. It was so much more of a better movie than say Avatar 2 would be to Avatar 1. You're getting a lot of the same things there. You're getting a lot of different stuff here.
Yeah. I think it's remarkable how it was able to give the fans of the original everything they wanted and they love it, and it was also very open and welcoming to new fans.
Yeah.
And it just kind of was this uniting theater experience where it was like everybody was ready for like a big movie. The first big one. That's why Tom waited and didn't drop it during the pandemic. Thank God he
Yep.
didn't let it go straight to streaming. That would have been a
Oh.
huge loss for the
Huge
culture.
miss. Huge miss.
But yeah, instead it was like this big event that everybody, old, young, you like the original, you've never seen the original, it didn't matter. Like it was just, and everybody was able to go see it. Everyone had at least a good time, and it was just a trip to see in theaters. So it was just good for movies in general that it was so big and so successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Mine, going off another one where don't love the first one, love the second one. My number 4 is Blade Runner 2049.
Nice.
I appreciate kind of a foundation that Blade Runner laid, the Ridley Scott movie from the 80s. I don't like that movie very much, but I'm glad it did as well as it did because it was kind of it's like a headier sci-fi movie that wasn't something that was going to get made a lot, and it was sort of a risk, and it did really well. And this eventually, it led to like way more science fiction movies being made and put into theaters, and Blade Runner 2049 is phenomenal.
Yeah.
What Denis was able to do with this world, expand on it, and the way that this is one of the best looking movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I rewatched this leading up to this episode and had really forgotten how just great the story is and how fantastic Ryan Gosling is. I think this was his follow-up to La La Land. And it's such a different movie and such a different character. And he's asked to do so many different things. And it's just a great back-to-back 1-2 punch of like, look at the different types of movies I can just kill it in.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. I can sing, I can dance, and I can be an android.
Yeah.
Android. A 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
This also introduced a lot of people to Ana de Armas. And this was the first time in my life that I realized it was Robin Wright who was in The Princess Bride.
Oh, you never put
as his handler, we'll call it.
Dave Bautista in the opening scene.
Steals the opening scene.
He looks so old in this movie.
He does.
Doesn't he?
He's just beaten down and like some some old farmer
and then
some forgotten planet.
Of course, Harrison Ford is back.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, for as weird as he is, Jared Leto works in this movie.
Yeah, right.
I think it was the perfect casting.
Yeah, it was.
I did see that they wanted David Bowie for that role instead, but he unfortunately passed
I
away.
definitely could have seen that.
Would have loved Bowie there.
Better health.
I think Jared Leto being as eccentric and as like bad of a person as it's rumored to be, like kind of fits better.
Oh, you don't want to talk arrogance.
Yeah,
you want to talk about self-importance and thinking that he's the best thing in the universe. Yeah, he pulled that off.
A character with a god complex.
Yeah, with a god.
Weird. Says the guy.
I do think this movie is going to show up later on in the list, so we can save further discussion for later. We don't need to talk about this movie like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that's fair.
So moving on to Dylan's number 4.
Yeah,
this is one where it kind of surprised me initially, but then I thought about it for like a second and a half longer and realized it was kind of inevitable.
Yeah, it is inevitable, and that is The Matrix Reloaded. Every time I talked about this on the podcast, it just gets a little better every time I watch it. So of course, rewatching it for this list, there was only one thing that was going to happen, and it was going to keep going up. At this point, I think that this movie is just tragically misunderstood, and I think it's a fantastic, kick-ass, awesome follow-up to The Matrix, my favorite movie of all time, and all the confusing stuff that's plot related, that's related to they're trying to set up a lot of kind of heady internet philosophical things that they then resolve in the third one. But they don't resolve a lot of it. They just kind of talk about a lot of it in the second one, which I totally get it. I can totally see why people checked out, why people didn't like the architect scene and the other stuff, and we're just like, this is dumb. They're going in a weird direction. I just wanted like a more straightforward action movie, and that's cool. But as someone who's into it, it's just like a oh gosh, what's a loop that like bounces back on itself? What's I forget the term for that. Like dang it. I just had it, but basically, every time I watch it, it just like I pick up new little things. I like it even a bit more. I'm just like I'm all in. Also, the action sequences are just all time great. There's at least 4 of them that are just incredible. I mean, the action sequences are on another freaking level for this movie. Morpheus once again has just incredible lines. The love story with Neo and Trinity. I mean, it's just great. I had a great time. So number 4. This one definitely climbed as time went on, even jumping up a spot today when I woke up and I was like, what am I doing?
Go. Yeah,
I like Star Wars, but I mean, I loved rewatching Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
So that's my number 4.
I agree. I like that they dropped Reloaded, and then the next year, like not even a full year later, they dropped Revolutions, and I thought both of those kind of back to back are just a very fitting quick end to the Matrix trilogy.
I mean, they did it the way, I mean, because James Cameron is doing it the same way for Avatar, where he filmed them both at the same time, released them a year apart.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, objectively, it's the third one is a definite step down. The second one, more and more I watch it, it's a step down from the first, but not. It gets a smaller step each time, you guys.
Yeah. Well,
it'll just be, you don't even notice.
Yeah.
Just roll right over it.
The ending of the trilogy is always going to be handled a little bit differently, and I think that's what gives it that like finality, and therefore it's like doesn't live up to all the cool action stuff of the first two. And you're like, you're not disappointed, you understand it, but you're like, oh, I still wish it was as cool as the first two. Mm-hmm. And Matrix Reloaded definitely, like the action sequences are ramped up again, from how cool the first one was, right?
And I think just the stuff in general, the stuff that people don't like about it, I am liking more and more, which is the heady philosophical. The conversation with the architect is becoming one of my favorite scenes. When obviously the first time I saw it back in whenever it was one of my least favorite, but now it's like I get it. I just get it a little more. Every little reaction and things make more sense. So I'm into it.
There's a lot of philosophy that you can break down. It's very good.
Oh yeah. And good just choice. Like what the Matrix is. Like I understand now.
You can see the code.
It's so deep. This is you realize then from the beginning. Okay, you can go on.
So jumping into my number 3 then, kind of another, I guess we'll call it coding type movie. I went with Tron Legacy.
Wow.
I've never seen this.
So you've never seen?
I have. I saw it when it came out. We were in Eau Claire, right?
Yeah. This is another. This came out in 2010. So this is another just absolute like blast visually to watch. Like this, I mean, it's based off that video game, right? And then the first movie, and it's very standard as far as like what's actually like going on. But Jeff Bridges gives an amazing performance. This is one of the first big roles I feel like Olivia Wilde did a lot in. And visually great, acting very good. The best part about this movie is the fucking soundtrack. It is phenomenal. It's one of the best soundtracks like of all time. It's just Daft Punk just riffing for 2 hours and just giving you everything possible that they have in their repertoire. It's a perfect, absolutely perfect soundtrack for this film. It's just cool as shit to look at. Fake Jeff Bridges looks very good, despite the fact, I mean, it's still CGI to a certain degree. The sets, the settings of like his, I forget the Kevin or Sam, excuse me, not Kevin Flynn, Sam Flynn, played by Garrett Hedlund. His like abode is like an abandoned like dock holding like storage area that they just like made a studio apartment, and it looks dope as shit. The studio apartment that like his dad has, it like way out off the grid, is super cool, and everything is just like the most ramped up futuristic looking thing you could think of. Like you've seen the movie Oblivion. It's like that if we made it sleeker and like added LEDs to everything. It's just such a cool movie. It's hard not to get like lost in like this could be a David Bowie, like this could be a David Bowie music video the entire way through.
Should have been in both.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's a great pick. I've been meaning to rewatch this because I remember having a good time when I saw it in theaters. Like I was into it, and
The
then
I think
payoff
I
is
have
good.
this movie.
haven't seen it since.
We definitely need to sit down and watch this, Nate. It's you might not find like the themes like all that interesting, but what happens on screen and like just
Maybe
getting lost in the movie is a fantastic way to spend 2 hours.
maybe
Sure.
Tron Night. We watched the original and then Tron Legacy.
I'm
Yeah.
into
No,
it.
that's a lot of Tron. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Get all out of our system at once. All right, on to you, Nate.
On to me. My number 3 is a movie I've talked about on this show a lot, and that is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Nice.
The more, anytime I get like a bit of a Harry Potter itch, it's this one easily. I think this stands so far above the rest of the series, and I think they did a good job. But like, there's not a bad movie of the 8.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a borderline miracle that basically everybody was around for all of them, and none of them suck, and they actually made all of them.
Yeah.
But for this one in 2004, we just got a little treat where Alfonso Cuarón came in
Mm-hmm.
to make one Harry Potter movie.
I wish he had made more.
Oh my God, I know. If he had made all of these, it would possibly be the greatest series ever made.
Yeah. Like I'm glad we
Um,
differentiated directors so it didn't feel stale, but like we needed like 2 from each director instead of just
Yeah.
one from Cuarón.
Right. Yeah, I'd take one away from Yates and give it to Cuarón.
At least
Sure.
one.
Yeah, at least one. But Cuarón's one of the best directors ever. He's one of my favorite directors, and this is one of his best movies. I mean, it's just one of the best fantasy movies ever made. And it almost, in an 8-movie series, this kind of can stand on its own. I mean,
think
it does
so.
from a quality perspective, but also like, because it's the only one that doesn't have Voldemort in it
Mm-hmm.
or like mentioned in any way, really.
Yeah.
It is just kind of its own little thing, which makes it even cooler that it's the one that was made by Cuarón.
Mhm.
Like, I can just kind of watch this one, and it's its own world apart from all the others almost. And I just love this to death. I bet I've watched it over 100 times.
Dang.
Yeah, it was fun when we went through all of them and ranked them. I know this was your number 1. I think this was maybe number 2 for me. It was up there, but yeah, this is a great choice. And glad that Harry Potter deserves a movie on the list.
Yeah, I think
For
so.
sure.
Just
For
kind
sure.
of placeholder for that whole endeavor, which, as you mentioned, was very successful. All right, on to me for another successful endeavor. My number
Yeah.
3 is the widely acclaimed and beloved Dark Knight from 2008. What can be said that has not already been said about this movie? It just, I rewatched it. It was great once again. It wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't quite as gripping and engaging, just because I think so much of what makes it amazing is the set pieces, and then once you see those 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, then they become a little less exciting. So then it's like,
Yeah.
all right, but that's just going to happen with any movie. I mean, at the end of the day, I still try to remember just how insanely good it was when it came out, and just how mind blown everybody was. And then obviously Heath Ledger's performance, still an all timer in Hollywood history. So it had to be on there. And as if a part of what we're looking for in a good sequel is, big turning point moments for like the main characters, and kind of, taking us from one place, moving us to another, and setting up like the final installment. This does all those things really well. Like, I really feel like this establishes like who he is at the beginning of the movie, or who he was in Batman Begins. Like, by the end of this, he definitely has changed as a character, and like we look at him differently. He seems much more fallible and human, and kind of like, I don't know. I just think Nolan pulled that off really well.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of the best theater experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
It was it came out over the summer in, what was this, 08?
Yeah, we lost your mic, but 08.
Yeah, Dylan, we can't hear you. Yeah, so 08, I was up north in Detroit Lakes for a baseball tournament. And we had like Saturday was like a morning game and then like an evening game. So we had the middle of the day just completely free.
Okay.
And
nice.
we went to see, like, as an entire team. So like few of our parents. I bet there were like close to 20 of us.
Oh damn.
Dang.
Like 15 to 20 of us saw The Dark Knight in the theater, and there was a group of like 4 guys sitting a few rows in front of us that clearly had seen the movie like many times already. And the moment when the Batmobile like crashes, when they're doing that whole thing, like transporting Harvey like under the city, kind of like
Yeah.
lower, when they go through lower Fifth, and then he gets kind of messed up, and then you just kind of see the car like sort of shaking or whatever, and then like the music picks up, and all of a sudden he bolts out of there in his motorcycle.
Yeah.
These 4 guys, like, I don't remember exactly if they stood up, but they were screaming and cheering so loudly when that happened, and like nobody cared. It added to the excitement of the moment. So
Just that raw, like, oh fuck yeah, like
Yeah. Oh my god. And yeah, that was really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this movie's phenomenal. Like you said, all the set pieces. I mean, the opening sequence with the heist that the Joker
Great.
pulls off is that'll go down as probably
Great tone setter.
one of the best opening sequences in the entire movie, and then it just kicks off from there. There's so much going on. I know that one of my friends said like, oh, it's too long, and it changes in the middle. It's like, no, that's the point. Like that change with Harvey Dent towards the end and getting Two-Face is another like great thing about this movie. It doesn't just hit one villain. Yeah.
I was gonna say too, in a lot of superhero movies, they'll try to do this, right? The idea of we're gonna introduce a villain in this movie and kill him in this movie, right? Or kill them in this movie, right? This one movie will be their only. We're gonna meet them, they're gonna be evil, and it's gonna happen just in this movie. In Dark Knight, that almost happens just in like the last 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, we're telling the whole Two-Face arc in this 45 minutes, and we're just gonna like get it in there. Like, and that's what I forget about when I think about the Dark Knight is the Two-Face stuff. And then I'm like, oh yeah, there's all this, like, and I think that is pretty well done.
It helps set up Dark Knight Rises and why there's such a need for Batman, and why all the political stuff matters and everything that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and great performance from Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent. I feel like definitely his like career or like his best, at least that I can remember. Like, he was a great cast for that role.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right,
great choice here, Dylan.
All right, getting into the top 2. This is fascinating because I think you guys have the same but flipped.
Yep.
And then I don't have either of those movies.
God,
so,
you're such a rebel, Nate.
So do we want to do this? Do we want to talk about your number 2, and then we can talk about my number 2 or my number 1, which is Dylan's number? You know what I mean? Do you want to switch it so we don't talk about it back and forth?
Sure. We can.
I think this is how we should do it. You talked about your number 2. Then me and Adam will geek out about our combined number 1s and number 2s.
Yeah.
And then we'll finish the episode with your number 1.
Let's do that.
That works.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the most efficient way.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. There's no reason to break it up unnecessarily.
Jumping around, breaking the chain here. My number 2 is Paddington 2, which is
Knew it had to be on here somewhere.
Yeah.
I've heard the best movie of all time. So
it very well might be.
It might be the greatest thing ever put to film.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Adam, especially with how much you loved the first one.
Yeah.
This one is just better in every way.
I'm very excited to get to it. I had to give number 1 like a little room to breathe, and I'll get there. But
the characters that they add out, the family's great.
Yeah.
Sally Hawkins and I can't remember the guy who plays the dad, Hugh Bonneville. Very fun. Ben Whishaw voicing Paddington is fantastic. The additions of Hugh Grant and Brendan Gleeson. Hugh Grant is possibly his best role as Phoenix Buchanan.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
He's amazing. Also, make sure you hang around for like the credits scene with Hugh Grant, because just gold star. And then Brendan Gleeson as an angry, like dressed in pink prison chef.
Okay.
Is just a stroke of genius. He's so perfectly cast for that role, and to just be the guy with the heart of stone that eventually has that stone melted by Paddington's charm.
By a talking bear.
by a talking bear and his marmalade
Yeah,
is
God, his
just
marmalade.
it's brilliant. This movie is fantastic, and I will always think of Dylan when you and I saw that Nicolas Cage movie.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called.
Unbearable Weight of Massive
Unbearable
Talent.
Weight of Massive Talent, when they were talking about their 3 favorite movies, and then Pedro Pascal says Paddington 2.
Yeah.
And that was at the perfect moment because I had been talking it up and you still hadn't seen Paddington 2.
Yep.
And seeing that together in the theater, we were both just dying.
That was
so
perfect.
perfect.
I felt like that joke was written just for us.
Absolutely. So yeah, my number 2, Paddington 2. It's a masterpiece. Watch both of them. And yeah, first one's great. Watch that also so you can watch this.
Yeah.
Nice.
I can't wait to watch 2. 1 was phenomenal, so I'll plug that again. Absolutely check it out. And then especially if you got kids, this is a perfect.
Oh yeah. Great family movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Fun for the whole
so
family.
should we do Dylan's 2 and Adam's 1 since that was also in my list? We can kind of get that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now here we have Dylan's number 2 and then Adam's number 1. Which, Adam, what is it?
What is it, Adam?
Blade Runner 2049. As previously stated, Denny just absolutely pulls this off. The shots, the visuals of this movie. I know we talked about Tron looking cool. This is cool in a different way because it's more grounded. It's more like a lived-in universe of what the future might look like or could look like, or everything that was great about the sci-fi elements from the first one is jacked up here, and I think expanded on even more. I think the spots I remember, the shots I look at the most are Kay walking out when he sees the honeybees when he's going to Vegas, like how the color, like how gold all that stuff is, and everything's like irradiated, and he's just like venturing through that old hotel. The shot over what LA looks like now with like the seawall and like the giant like police tower, like all of that stuff looks incredible. And then the opening sequence when he lands on, I guess it's just outside, I thought it was another planet, but it's just outside of LA, where he meets Sapper Morton and Dave Bautista's character, that like farm, that grub farm where everything's just like dirty and dingy and gross and gray. It's like it's gray and yellow and just garbage. It looks like a waste management plant. It just looks so fantastic, and there's so much going on here. I mean, Dylan, what do you want to talk about here? I can go on.
I mean, pretty much, seconding everything that you guys have said. It just from the moment it starts, you just feel that everything is in like Denis is in such control that like what we're about to see is just a great movie that is just well put together. It's just every little scene, the character work, the imagery, like even in that opening scene when he goes to Dave Bautista's place and he's making those like noodles, like he's like boiling those, like just like the aesthetic of just like that little room with like the boiling noodles, and it's just so like just the little details that it just makes every rewatch so fun and interesting. And I like how it's an action thriller and it has good action sequences, but that's not like what is necessarily like the point of the whole thing, or like that's not even like what I think about first when I think about what I like about this movie.
Yeah,
it's not even like the shootouts. So then when those come up on rewatch, I'm like, oh yeah. Or like when he's flying and he completely loses power and just like drops down into the waist like area, just like and then like you mentioned, Nate, the actual story is really, really well thought out and put together and cool, and like it's a bit of a trip the first time, but then the second time and on rewatch it's even more rewarding because you kind of know like what's going on more. So there's little clues. Like it's just a really well put together movie all the way around, and it's always fun to rewatch.
Yeah, that twist that goes on, and I guess the middle, second half. You don't necessarily see it coming the first go around, and him trying to figure out like who he is and what all of that, and venturing out into that like child slave area,
the orphanage,
the orphanage
place.
And stuff. It's just so every shot he was like, all right, we're gonna build a scene around this cool place I found, and then wrote the scene, did it all, and shot it. It was like, this is just the best spot to incorporate this post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, like the juxtaposition between the orphanage and what that looks like and what LA now looks like and all of its problems, and I just love the whole aesthetic of it. It's the
I-
storyline meets perfectly with the aesthetic.
Yeah, I think another thing that I enjoy or that I feel like makes more sense that fits better is the actual ending. You know, there maybe just spoiler, but like the way that it's like just on a beach and it's kind of like outside like the city walls, like outside like society and technology and everything that we've been living in. This, you know, mankind and our crazy fucking creations. It's just like the water and the tide and like that is what's gonna kill you. Like it's like so simple. Like the first time I saw it I thought it was almost anticlimactic, but now it's
Yeah.
like it just fits thematically with everything, you know. Drowning is the way of death, and just like water crashing against like the seawall, and that's kind of where this big moment is happening, like for Kay and for I just I like
whether
the
or
end
not
more.
you're a replicant or a human being, like that is the ultimate equalizer. Like we're all fighting for life, and like
Yeah,
what
the
does
ship
that
is
mean?
sinking.
The ship
Yeah.
is like all of that.
Like-
Like it's one of the best, I guess, philosophic, as we talked about with The Matrix, one of the best philosophic sci-fi movies we've gotten, and it just happens to look fucking badass, and it's so good. Highly
All
recommend
right.
if you haven't seen. So
And then pivoting to my number 1 and Adam's number 2.
Just realized how hard this is going to be to timestamp now.
Oh yeah, good luck.
So Adam's number 2, and then Dylan's number 1. Dylan, what is it?
It is the action sci-fi classic from 2015, Mad Max Fury Road.
I mean,
Yeah, this is. I should say this is my number 6.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little surprised you didn't have it on there, but then again, you
Well-
kind of were a little late to or like you didn't really like it that much until the second viewing, right?
Yeah, I've seen it 3 times now. I didn't really know what to make of it on first viewing, and I really liked it the second time. Also, I didn't want to include it because it's the only one I've seen, so I can't really speak to
Oh, yeah, the
Like,
original.
you
how
haven't
well
seen
it
like
works
Road Warrior or
as
anything?
a sequel. I haven't seen any of the earlier ones, so
Mhm,
that made
mhm.
it a little bit easier for me to leave off of my top 5, but it's definitely at the top of the honorable mentions.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like this movie was that you sat down in your seat and there might as well have just been like an adrenaline needle that they just handed you to like just jack into your heart and just watch like 2 hours of just like the most high octane crazy shit you can possibly imagine. It's like, all right, we're gonna build 800 cars, we're gonna wreck 700 cars during production. It's just gonna be this. We're gonna drive around in a desert and kill shit. Like,
Yeah. No, I think it's incredible how both of these, Blade Runner 2049 and Mad Max Fury Road, they took something that was decades old and reinvented it while also maintaining all the best parts of the originals. And then with Mad Max especially, I mean, committed so hard to like the vision of what it was going to be. Like it's, like this seems like the type of movie that he came up with in the 80s, because in the 80s this type of movie for sure would have been made. Nonstop action, like, and it would have been bad. But instead, he's held on to this amazing idea, and now juxtaposed against the other types of action sci-fi movies, it feels so different and just like a freaking just punch to the face every time, because it's just like it's so committed from the get-go of like what it is, like fast huge car chase, 15-minute break, huge car chase, like, and just, but also weaving in like the religious stuff and the political stuff, and kind of like somehow really building on this world when it's an apocalyptic world and there isn't much to build on because it's all desert anyways, but still managing to build on it. Just here's this city thing, and over there's another city thing, and we're gonna drive kind of in between the two of them. And then you're just like, oh yeah, I get it, And when they're like, oh, I'm gonna take off across the salt fields, it has to end eventually, and then the other character is like, no, it doesn't. Like,
it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's just so well done, and it blew me away in theaters, and then on rewatch it's also been great. And then I know you have the chrome version, the black and chrome version, Nate.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet.
That.
We should sit down and watch that.
That
for sure.
Let's do Tron and then Mad Max. Like, fuck watching the first
Tron and then take the Mad Max and like strip away the color.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I wanted to bounce off this, Dylan, that you said. The thing that I noticed the second time is how amazing the story is. Because I don't love action for action's sake, although this has some of the best ever made. but the core of this story, like if you just look at pictures of this movie, you would never know that it's like this magnificent, like feminist and like sort of working class, like revolutionary call to arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like spirituality in it. like, like
Yeah, and like
That's so
rise
much.
up against your capitalist overlords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all works really well. It's also,
For sure.
I will say this every time we talk about it, the loudest movie ever made.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. For real. No, I would agree with you on that. And then the last thing, and the only reason why I just put it a tiny hair above Blade Runner 2049. So in my top 100 right now, Blade Runner 2049 is higher than Mad Max Fury Road. But if
Okay.
we're talking sequels, I got to give extra points to writer and director George Miller.
Yeah.
Who, because what Denis was able to do with the vision from the original was great with Blade Runner, but I mean, to actually be the guy
Yeah.
and to come back these many years later and just hit us with that is just like, oh, the audacity.
It's like, drop it in. And you're like, you're welcome, everyone.
yeah.
welcome.
So
I've been holding on to this gem for 20, 30 years. And here you go.
exactly. That's how Tom Cruise probably felt too. But yeah. So that's my number one, Mad Max Fury Road, and Nate and Adam's number 2.
Awesome. So going in
Alright.
a completely different direction here.
Yeah, hard left.
Absolutely. This is my favorite movie from my favorite director, and that is Before Sunset. This is such a funny movie to bring up after Mad Max Fury Road. Because Mad Max, you finish the list, like number 1, you got this movie that's like we're number 1 with a bang.
Yeah.
And then I'm just kind of sliding in here.
You
with
guys, but wait.
Coasting in. But
right.
wait. But wait.
This-
before the desert, before the sunset.
Yes.
Okay.
Before Sunset, the
tell us
sequel
on this.
to 1995's Before Sunrise with Ethan Hawke and my God, I'm blanking on her name right now. Julie
Favorite-
Delpy.
I was like,
Mm,
favorite
yep.
movie, can't even remember.
Yeah.
kidding.
It's two characters who meet in Vienna in 1995 and have kind of a one-night perfect romance, and then they meet again 9 years later in Paris, and another just basically in real time. This movie is 80 minutes long.
Damn.
And they are, I want to say, the age in this movie that we are now.
Okay.
Okay.
And that point where they've gone through their 20s and it's just life has not lived up to the promise that you expect it will when you're in your teens and even your early and like mid 20s.
Mm-hmm.
They've been beaten down a little bit. One of them has a bad marriage. The other one has just been going through a string of bad relationships. And it just captures this feeling that everyone has at some point so perfectly, and not in like a showy, bombastic, like drive it down your throat way that a lot of movies will, but in that classic Linklater way where he makes characters that are so real
Mm-hmm.
that you can just watch them walk and talk for 80 minutes. And it's just like one of the most profound things ever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that is my pick for my favorite sequel of the 21st century.
This is a trilogy, right?
It is. Before Midnight came out in 2013. So they've been every 9 years apart. We did not get a fourth movie in 2022. There have been rumors of a potential fourth at some point.
Okay.
So maybe, but yeah, it is a trilogy. And I mean, if it ends just as a trilogy, the final scene and shot of Before Midnight, which would be, that's also on my honorable mentions, is phenomenal.
Yeah, I
Nice.
know you've
Well,
talked about
let's-
this a lot, so definitely. something
Yeah,
that
this is
we
on the
have to
watch list. Me and another renowned film critic that I know are going to be watching all three of these soon. So
Yes.
yeah, I will definitely let you know in a roundup episode what
Awesome.
I
I can't wait for,
thought.
to
Yeah.
hear what you guys think of these.
And then you already mentioned you mentioned the honorable mention list. So
I
let's
did.
keep mentioning some other honorable mentions.
So yeah, I'll
Anyone
just
you
go
wanna
really
mention?
quick. just because I just said Before Midnight would be an honorable mention. Mad Max Fury Road would be on my honorable mentions. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes
Ooh,
Okay.
on
nice.
my honorable mentions, and then probably Spider-Man 2, the
Yeah,
Raimi
Tobey Maguire
ones,
one,
and
yeah.
One of
then
mine as well.
and Thor Ragnarok. I think would be like my two
Yeah.
superhero sequel
Okay.
picks.
Nice. My honorable mentions were as I mentioned, Toy Story 3 came in at number 6. Kill Bill Volume 2 was my number
I was
7.
surprised this wasn't on yours.
It was hanging around that 5 spot, but
Mhm.
and then Spider-Man 2, Skyfall, my favorite of the Daniel Craig
Yep.
Bond movies.
That's a good one.
Then followed by Paddington 2, and then followed by Top Gun Maverick, and then followed by Doctor Sleep. So a whole bunch that
Nice.
got mentioned on your guys' list. So I'm
Yeah.
glad. But yeah, the Paddington 2 sandwiched right between Skyfall and Top Gun Maverick.
Great.
Exactly where it should be.
Watch those
Yeah.
back to back to back.
Yeah.
Sandwich Paddington 2. You see what I did there?
Yeah. Marmalade
Sandwich
sandwich.
Paddington 2 right between those two movies.
I had a little. I guess the ones I mentioned are more like serious movies, more like big budget, and some of the ones I had as honorable mentions are some of like my personal favorites, where I just thought like this is a better, or not a better, but this is a great follow up to something I enjoyed. So I had The Dark Knight, obviously, but then I had John Wick 2. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the first John Wick, but I liked the evolution of the universe of John Wick, like how much more they gave us and expanded, which I thought was really cool. And that's obviously like 3 is fine. I'm sure 4 is fine. The final ones are going to be fine, but like 1 and 2, I think are a really tight storyline. And then I also had Rush Hour 2, because I think
Nice.
the Rush Hour movies are fantastic. And
That wasn't in the
such a-
90s?
Oh, maybe it was.
No.
Fuck, I thought it was
No, I have it on my
2001.
list as well. It was 2001.
The
Okay.
one.
It's like,
Nice.
yeah, wait a second.
I have that at
Panicked for a
number
second.
20 on my
Yeah. It's just like,
Deep.
yeah, those are.
Honestly, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, honestly, once you get going down the sequel, like there are a lot. Like this isn't
For
even
sure.
including a lot of the. I didn't even go into the Marvel stuff at all.
Yeah, I stayed away from that.
I stayed completely away from those. Yeah, Shrek 2 was one that I've mentioned to you guys before that I think is
Yep.
really good. There's so many sequels.
Yeah,
There
my last.
really are. The one I wanted to give Creed a chance, and I wasn't able to rewatch it. And then I wanted to give Ocean's 12 a chance, but I wasn't able to rewatch it.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
Didn't want to forget about that cool little franchise.
My last honorable mention was 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is more of a spiritual sequel than it is a true sequel.
Still counts though.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen that, it's the
That movie's
Cloverfield universe without like any of the monster stuff. Really, it's just a contained one room drama thriller of
John
epic
Goodman.
proportion. Yeah, and
Mary Elizabeth Winstead and John Gallagher.
yeah, John
Jim
Gallagher Jr.
Jim
John
Gallagher.
Gallagher.
John
He
Gallagher.
plays Jim in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's John Gallagher Jr.
Yeah.
Just
Jim Gallagher Jr. John Gallagher.
Jim John George
Jim John
Gallagher.
Jameson Jr.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. So those are my honorable mentions, but yeah,
Awesome.
lot to pick from here. That's I think that's what made this a fun list.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we already had to break it into just 21st century because there's so many. We couldn't do just all time. I think if we do another one of these for the 20th century, maybe we each do a top 10 and we do like 3 different episodes, just because I feel like, if this is how many to choose from and we're only in 2022, if we're going in the 20th century, there's going to be so many good ones.
I will say though, they make way more sequels now than they used to.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's what people have complained
So
about.
we'll see. I mean, we'll have to
last
explore
decade.
it and see what we run into. But I don't think I don't think there are going to be as many. It's not going to be as dense.
Yeah,
that's a good point. They probably did not. So yeah, maybe we can get away with doing another one of these.
Predator
It'd be
2,
fun to
3,
do
and
another
4,
sequel, though.
Rambo 2, 3, and 4,
Maybe
Rocky 2, 3, and 4. I mean,
maybe for 20th century we do best sequels, not including The Godfather,
Or just, I don't know.
The Godfather 2. Don't know if any of you were gonna have Godfather 3 in your top 5. Probably not.
I was not. I can say that right now, definitively.
Not gonna make it.
Godfather 3 would not be on my best sequels of the 20th century list.
It's a hot take.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you know what? I did have Glass Onion at number 14.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very respectable,
Very
I
worthy
agree.
sequel.
I
kind of
agree.
inspired this episode. And if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, so go check it out.
Absolutely.
All right, whose turn is it to put a wrap on the show?
I've got it.
All right, take it away, Adam.
Every leap of civilization was built on the back of a disposable workforce, but I can only make so many.